Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Waxing Table podcast. I'm Michaela, and I'm so glad that you are here with me today. Today is a special day, and I'm so excited to be bringing to you a topic that I think you guys will really enjoy. Today, I'm talking about threading versus waxing, and I'm doing it with my fellow esthetician friend here, Megs, and her name is the Eyebrow Goddess on Instagram. How are you doing today, girl?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited for the episode.
Yes, me too. So we're talking about threading versus waxing, and what makes it so unique is that you are exclusively a brow artist, correct?
Yes, yeah. Those are I only do brow services aside from lash lifts.
Okay, cool. And you only offer threading, is that right?
So I offer both threading and waxing, but I would say about 98% of my clientele is threading.
Threading. And do you like threading
Yeah.
better?
I do.
Yeah.
I consider it my specialty. It's how I got into the brow world. And honestly, I feel like now I'm just about 9 years in, and it's kind of all I know at this point. I feel like it's definitely my favorite.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so before we dive into the differences between the two hair removal services, I would love for you to share with us a little bit about yourself, what got you into aesthetics, how you landed in this industry, and what kind of motivated you to start your own business.
Yeah, so I got in it, like I said, 9 years ago when I was kind of first getting into the aesthetics world. I was working in a orthodontist office. So I was working just in the dental world and I wanted to go into that. So I went and signed up to or started to do like the program training for a registered dental assistant. And I ended up not getting into the program because there was too many people into it. And that kind of kickstarted like what other trade schools are there that I don't have to like fully go back to college for? College was my thing. And I kind of wanted something that was like quick and easy, and I had the whole program lined up, and then when I was done I got to start. I didn't have to take a long time to start, right? So then I found aesthetics, and I had suffered with acne as a teen all the way through, I mean all the way up until now. So the skincare world always kind of interested me and intrigued me in a way that just I had issues and I looked for something to solve that, and facials were super fun. So I started with a completely open mind when I went into beauty school, and I fell in love with skincare, which is so funny because I don't practice skincare at all anymore. But that was what got my feet wet, if you will. And when I graduated and got my license, I kind of started working in the skincare world, and I'm still stand like that. This is a really good, my recommendation for anybody new. But I tried a lot of different things. I worked under a surgeon at one point. I worked so like in the more medical med spa setting. I worked for myself super early on. That did not go well. I worked under people. I worked as, contracted work, rental, all the things. So it was really a good way for me to weed out what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And when I found threading and started working at a brow boutique, it was kind of like a makeup boutique small business that did services as well. And they taught me how to do the hand tied threading method, which is what I still currently offer. And I completely fell in love. I loved the process of learning. And as we know, when you're new with something, it's super frustrating. So the fact that I actually enjoyed, fumbling my way through was a really good indication of like longevity doing this. And then when I started working with clients, it was so much fun getting to know these women, these people, men, women, all kinds of stages in their life and everything. And, working with them towards a common goal and just the whole process of it. I just completely fell in love. So I did that for a couple years at that boutique, and then went out on my own, and I've been out on my own ever since.
I love that. And do you like being out on your own better?
I do. I feel like most of us who end up as small business owners kind of have issue with structure and like working for other people and working under people. We have a lot of really loud ideas and we want to pursue them. And it's not that I was a bad employee. I feel like you almost succeed so far that you like you can't go any further and then you just feel trapped. So I felt like entrepreneurship was my only other option. I didn't hate working under people, but I wanted to be making the rules, right? I wanted to be making the decisions. I wanted to just do what I wanted to do instead of being told what to do. And so personally, that aspect of it, I now that I've been out on my own for as long as I have, I always joke all the time that I would be the worst employee because I just wouldn't know how to be an employee anymore. I've just been in charge of myself for such a long time. And even back when I was younger, I dropped out of high school like halfway through to go homeschool and finish that way because I just didn't like, I just have never loved structure. So I think that entrepreneurship, even though it's really funny because you almost have to force yourself to have a ton of structure, I think I just like to be the one to make the structure versus being forced into somebody else's version. So
Okay. I
yeah.
relate completely.
Right. And I think that's why there's so many of us that have like ADHD or like some type of neurodivergency when you see like small business owners or even in the beauty world, honestly. And I think a lot of that is just that we wanted to find our own way. And it's super difficult, but I think that that's like definitely the spark of motivation is really just not being able to fit in other people's structured elements.
Yes, I completely relate. I'm literally the same way. And oh my gosh, you were homeschooled? I was too.
Oh my God, I love that. Yes.
Yes.
It was awesome.
How long were you homeschooled for?
The last 2 years, well, I graduated like 6 months early from high school, so technically like a year and a half. I did
Okay.
like an accelerated senior year, so I kind of just did it in shortened time, like 6 months or whatever, instead of the full year. And then I started college that second half. So I was in enrolled in like a local community college the second half of my what would have been my senior year.
Nice. So was it like dual credit that you were doing?
It
Or what?
actually was a little bit different. They let me full blown graduate at that half mark. So like I didn't walk until everybody else, but I was like done with high school and enrolled in a community college as like a regular student.
I love that for you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Shout out to all our homeschoolers listening.
Right? No, seriously. And I think that's honestly what makes I think that's what I love about like the beauty world. I'm very firm in like continuing education. And I think it's just because I've always had that motivation to find, but it only has to be like the education I'm interested in, which I did notice.
Yes.
When
Yes.
you start to get to college, I was like, I don't want to do general ed. I want to just like pick random classes to take. And it's like
Yes.
that's
Me
the
too.
neurodivergency creeping out too.
Me too. I don't like being limited to like one specific like area of study. I like to just do different things that I feel like I can resonate with.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the beauty of the just being a small business owner and being in the beauty world. Like we can take classes. I've taken courses that have nothing to do with the beauty world, and like I've always left with like a lesson or something I can correlate or utilize or like benefit my business in some way, shape, or form. So that's always been a favorite of mine is that I can follow those random spurts of like I recently did a creative writing course that has absolutely nothing to do with the beauty world at all, but it made like writing content or captions or something just easier because I didn't have to do that style. So like it was almost easier to step into what I know. It was kind of like a reset. So I don't know. I feel like continuing education is so powerful.
Yes, I completely stand with you on that. And I think creative writing has almost everything to do with our industry at this point. Like
Right? No,
we're
it's true.
writing
Social
everything.
media. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome for you. I love that. What lessons do you think you learned in this whole process of like you starting your business and getting into the things that you truly, truly love to do?
Yeah, I feel like one of the things I always talk about is just being a forever learner. I think that when I first got out of the beauty world, I had a lot of like hubris and I was like, I know everything. And it led me to like really crash and burn. I went out right out into my own owning like a rental and I had no clientele. I had no idea what I was doing. So I left that venture with just like debt and skincare products that were going bad because I never sold any of them. And just like a huge lesson of it takes time, it takes experience, and it's okay to still need to learn and be wrong. And you can know everything that you're supposed to know leaving beauty school fresh. And like I was crazy in beauty school. I was reading the textbooks start to finish. I was doing extra study. I really wanted to know everything that we were learning, but I still had no real world, experience. I didn't know how I knew ingredients back on like the back of my hand and I knew certain situations, but I'd never worked with a client before and I've never actually touched skin in that, professional setting. And there's just so many elements that you don't even realize you need to know until you actually get into it. So I feel like just being okay with being open to things. And then, of course, trying stuff. Cause like I wanted to do skincare. I'm here 9 years later, not doing skincare at all. I only do eyebrows. So I think if you close yourself off, you can close yourself off to like your true path. And so I'm really thankful that even in my failures, I never shut any doors. I just kind of kept going. I knew that no matter what route I took in the beauty world, and there's a lot of routes, which is beautiful. I love that aspect of this community and this industry. But I think when you start closing doors, you really limit yourself and you can shut yourself off. So I was thankful that with every failure, I just kept going. I knew I wanted to stay in aesthetics, and that was the pull forward. But I took a lot of different paths, and I'm thankful that none of those were burned or closed or anything like that.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Okay, so let's get into threading versus waxing. Let's talk about it. So if you're listening to this, I'm sure you know all about waxing. If you're an esthetician who practices any kind of hair removal services, mainly it's waxing that we learn. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of estheticians or just, hair removal wax specialists or anything that offer threading. And so when I first learned that you did threading, I was completely shocked because
Yeah.
I, yes, because I don't really see that often. And my last experience with threading was when I was in high school, of course, when all the trendy brows was in, the real small, thin brows were in. And threading was like just super popular. And so that's what I went for. But I would always dread it because it hurts so bad. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm excited to see, what your take is and kind of see, is that supposed to be, is that normal or is it not normal or what? So let's break down what is threading.
So, I mean, I will be completely honest. The biggest difference I would say between threading and waxing is that there's no regulatory board for threading. So there's no definition, I would say, like that's solid on it. I've kind of had to stumble my way through and being an educator in the world and learning myself. But there's no, like you said, you don't learn it in beauty school. So there's no written threading textbook, right? So I think that this question could be answered differently depending on who you ask. But in my years and my experience, I have always done the hand tied method. So from my research, my what I've seen online, following other threaders and things like that, there's three different styles of threading. There's the hand tied method, which is using your two hands to hold the loop and do perform the entirety of the threading service. There is the thread tied around your neck and held with one hand, I believe, one or two hands, and threaded that way, but your neck is involved for like the motion of the thread. And then there is the hand and in the mouth threading. So your mouth is like kind of holding the anchor, and then you're threading along with your hand as well, but I think only one hand. So again, your mouth and like neck, uh, jaw kind of area is involved as far as the motion. So my method is only done with my hands. And I've always felt that it's the cleanliest way. I mean, around the neck, I don't necessarily see anything sanitary issue. I feel like that's more ergonomic issue. I can see just like our discomfort breaking down over time. I know that our necks are already in a strain just in doing any sort of waxing, lashing, anything like that. We're kind of bent over. So I feel like being bent over and then also adding emotion into there that's not natural could just run into ergonomical issues. And of course, I like most of us in the beauty world want longevity. So when I kind of go about it pragmatically, me having as much control as I want in the setting, we know that brows are scary. We don't want to grab anything we don't want to grab. So my neck and my body, and I mean, I'm somebody who's dealt with like a muscle spasm. I don't want that to be really involved in the hair removal process, right? I want to limit any variables that are, coming into play. So I just feel like I have the most control with my hands and my wrists. And it's the same exact thing that we've used for waxing. So as far as the parallel between the two and trying to keep the client experience the same, I think it just, they kind of go hand in hand. They seem um equal, I guess you could say, just from client experience. There's just less moving parts. And so I've always performed the hand tied method. It's a loop that you create with thread and you twist that loop. In the center, there's twists, and the twists are what wrap around the hair and remove it from its root. So you're able to grab kind of anything within that root, that loop, and you can grab a single hair up to like a row of hairs. So I always say it's kind of like um, hair removal at the speed of waxing, but with the safety and less damage to the skin as like tweezing.
Okay, so threading does remove the hair from the root as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
no cutting or breakage unless it's done incorrectly.
Okay, that's really good to know because I've kind of wondered here recently. I have a friend who she only just prefers to get her brows threaded, and I'm like, man, I don't offer threading, so
Yeah.
and I've was just told from the past. Of course, it's not correct now that um, threading doesn't remove the hair from the root. It's kind of like shaving a little bit, and I'm like, no, that's not right. I know that's not right now. But
Yeah.
before then, just I didn't know anything. So it just kind of deterred me away. So but I am very interested in threading, and I think it's something that you could also add to your list of services, because we know waxing, there are a lot more contraindications to that. There could be people who may be on acne medication or just have super, super hypersensitive skin. Of course, you are going to exfoliate the skin when you're waxing as well. Does any of this happen with threading?
So this has been something that's kind of come up more recently when I've talked to more threaders. I personally have not experienced any kind of exfoliation. There's just no way for the thread to really be grabbing the skin, especially like the dead layers. I could see it lifting flaky skin off, as it glides across, just like a spoolie running across the skin would. But excuse me. I just don't see any way for it to truly exfoliate in the same caliber that it does waxing. So I've always said that it's safe, and in my experience, also safe freshly after exfoliation or like a chemical peel or using retinols or anything like that. Even up to, I have a client that's a med spa owner, and she uses like really high grade retinols and topicals, and her skin's pretty sensitized, and I've never had any issues. Now, this is saying me currently at my state as an expert as a threader. Just like with waxing, you can do it incorrectly. You can burn people, you can lift skin, all of those things. We can run into the same issues. They're just slightly different with threading. So I think the most common one that people have seen is the nicking of the skin and like leaving scabs. I think that's the most
Mm-hmm.
common because if the problem with waxing or the problem with threading versus waxing is that the client is involved, right? We have
Right.
our hands tied literally in our thread, so we can't handle the client's skin at that stage. So the client is actually doing a hold, right, for the underside, not as much on the top side, depending on the client's skin, of course, but the underside is a lot of delicate, loose skin. So we have to have our client hold in a specific way. Now, if your client is not holding properly, it's your job as the professional to be really communicative and alert them, stop, pause the threading if they're moving or if they're flinching. Especially if somebody who's never had it done before. There's movement. This is a person that you're working on. They're not like a doll head. So we have to be conscientious and really observant as you're threading to not just be so zoomed into what you're doing thread wise, but also watching your client. So there's variations that can cause issues, and if the skin gets caught or it's a little too loose and not held taut, we can grab that. Like I said, it's going to grab anything in that zone with the thread loop. So it's going to grab skin if it's loose and it pops up kind of the way that it does, because the thread needs, in order to not cut the hairs, right? The thread needs to glide across the skin and like kind of run into that hair root so that it can wrap the entire length of the hair shaft and then pull it.
Mm,
And the
okay.
motion, if you're doing the thread correctly, is done quickly. So a lot of the times when I hear people that have discomfort and pain, it's because it's almost like tweezing. If you're going slowly, you're feeling every single hair getting pulled. So if you're moving really quick with the thread, the same way that you're waxing really quickly when you're removing your strips and everything and not lingering or taking a long time to pull that, it's the same kind of principle. We want to move quick with hair removal because I think it's the only thing that feels comfortable. So instead of it being a painful experience, it's a sting, a quick sting, and it's over. So it's kind of the same thing with thread. The quicker you move, the more comfortable the service is with the appointment, the more you're getting your time back. But the flip side of that, just like with waxing, you need to make sure that you're doing everything appropriately in order to be able to move quickly. So your pressure has to be proper. Your client needs to be holding taut. You need to be conscientious of the skin condition and its current state. Is it dry? Is it oily? Is it loose skin? Is it tight, like youthful skin? All of these things come into play. So I've had people reach out and ask about my trainings and things like that because threading isn't under a regulatory board. So they're like, oh, we can just learn this thing and I can go thread. And it's like, in theory, yes. But I personally, in the way that I teach threading, you need to know all of these skin elements, sanitation, and all these different things. So I've always stood behind you have to be a licensed professional in order to learn this. So I'm going to treat it as if it falls into the same category as waxing and that it's not some magical, unregulated thing. I'm going to pretend like it is so that I just think that you're going to have a better experience threading and your clients are gonna have a better experience with getting their brow started.
Absolutely. And safety is one of the first things that we learn in esthetician school, you know. So I think it's important to get the right training, even though you say it's unregulated, right? But I think it's so important to be a licensed professional because a licensed professional, you already understand that regardless, you have to be safe with your client, you have to be safe with yourself. So I think it just kind of sets a different tone. Um, and so you mentioned that, you know, whenever you are threading, the client has to be involved. They have to hold their skin taut. And with waxing, typically it's usually not so focused on the client holding them, depending on the surface, of course, and depending on the area of the body. Um,
I do want to
oh my
add something
gosh.
for the last little bit about the regulation and everything. As far as that goes, it's unregulated in the state of California. I think there are other states that it may be a little bit different as far as the regulations with threading. So I will throw that out there. It's unregulated in the state of California. So other places it might be different, but I do think majority is unregulated, and there are just a handful that do see it fall under the same category as like waxing and under the beauty license. So just a
Okay.
disclaimer.
Okay, gotcha. So okay, I remember what I was gonna say. So you know how like we try to make sure that our client have a really comfortable experience. And with waxing, after you remove the hair, typically we would add pressure to really relieve that pain from them. Do you find that you have to do the same thing, or how does that work as far as like controlling the pain and everything for it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I personally, this could be different for different people, of course. And I do feel like the longer that I've worked with clients, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of eyebrows and hundreds of clients. And I do think that pain is a very, very large variable. I think it's completely unique to the person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that some people find waxing more painful. I think some people find threading more painful. I think some people find the top more painful. Some people find the bottom more painful. I think it's a very wide thing. So I'll just say that first. In my experience, I don't think it's a commonality. But I personally don't really apply pressure. Like I said, with threading, your hands are kind of tied up the whole time. So um, I'm not removing that strip and applying pressure. I'm just threading. So I kind of feel like it's nice because you're getting everything done at once. Almost like when you're experiencing it, you're like almost just like hurry up and be done, because
Right.
especially anybody who's experienced a lot of pain, you're just like, let's get it over with. I always relate this to like the lip. The lip is the
Oh my
worst
gosh, the
area for hair
worst.
removal. It's so uncomfortable. So when I thread it, I'm literally like, let me know if you need a break. And my clients are like, no, like I'm gonna knuckle through and I'm just gonna like make you get all of it. So I kind of view that point. I'm like, I want to be quick and in and out. Now, if my clients have redness, irritation, or have some type of sensitivity, I have a few things that I like to use. So I always use some type of um tonic, toner, something along those lines after to kind of calm and soothe, right? I'll use either a professional grade product, or I kind of was known for at the earlier stages of my career of using like a distilled water and lavender essential oil diluted in the water. Just to spritz. Smells really good. It's kind of relaxing in itself. So that's kind of like a double benefit, just kind of calming them down as it calms down the skin. Something I've recently started utilizing is this little like handheld thing that has like a metal plate, like a stainless steel plate on it, and it gets hot and cool. So I'll use that. So instead of having like a cold globe that I have to keep cold in the fridge, this one actually uses its battery to get cold. So I don't have to cool it myself. So I'll use that sometimes to kind of just pat it around. Wax that ash is actually where I heard of that thing, just to give credit where credit is due. Um, and then, other things that I've used in the past are also just like skincare. I'm an esthetician at the end of it. That education didn't go anywhere. So something like a Hale and Hush serum. They have like a Soothe serum that I've used recently, which is really nice. I'll use it if the client's experiencing any excessive redness and maybe they have somewhere they want to go, or even post lamination. The skin's kind of irritated, and it's sensitized, it's dehydrated from just the process of lamination. So sometimes I'll just put on that little serum first and then apply like a balm on top of it. So, yeah, I think I definitely view it as a very customized approach. I want my clients to experience a unique approach to their skin. So, depending on what they need, I'll kind of go from there. But I do think it's important to have multiple options in your arsenal, and as far as calming and soothing. But as far as completely comparing it to waxing, no, I don't apply pressure after the like hair removal pull, if you will.
Okay, cool. That's really good to know the differences between like, the two. I know after you wax someone, typically you can kind of tell if they have a reaction or not. They'll either, get a histamine reaction or their skin will be obviously lifted. Have you had anything like that happen with waxing or with threading?
Yeah. Yeah. So no skin lifting. Obviously, I'm not exfoliating, so I don't really have threading doesn't have the ability to lift the skin in that way. I have noticed with like more in mature skin, you can get redness from excessive abrasion. So unlike waxing where you can't reapply on top because you're exfoliating, we're not exfoliating, so you can go over the area multiple times. But if the skin is compromised, you can go over the area and cause redness and like an irritation from just abrasion. So that's just more
Mm-hmm.
like almost like an Indian burn, like rubbing really hard in
Mm-hmm.
an area is going to cause that reaction. So it's kind of like that. Um, and then of course, like pulling the skin if the skin's not being held appropriately. But no like reactions. The histamine I think is common no matter I don't think it matters how you're removing the hair. I think if the hair is unfamiliar and you're doing a large area, I don't see it quite as often. Some people are like I would say somebody like brand new to waxing, you might see it on the brows if they have like more coarse hair. But I have seen it on the face, like the histamine reaction. So I
Mm-hmm.
think when you're dealing with large areas of hair removal and they're not used to it, most people get some sort of like reaction to just that much stimulation in that spot. But I feel like the same as waxing, it goes away after a couple hours, and they can also take like a antihistamine if medically safe to help reduce that.
Nice. Excuse me. So um if a professional esthetician who specializes in hair removal, if they were wanting to consider wax or threading, adding threading to their list of services, how should they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody's a little bit different. I feel like you have to just get started. So threading is a long journey. It's definitely, I think you can learn waxing quicker. I think that's just the truth of the fact. And because I think it's because of how threading is done. It's hand dexterity and it's holding your hands. I think it's similar to like lashing. I've had
Mhm.
lash techs try to learn threading and they do a really good job because they're used to holding the tweezers in a certain way. And they're also most of the times ambidextrous because they're using two tweezers as they work. So they're able to utilize both hands. Now, most of us have a dominant hand that they're using, even with waxing. And we hold like one side, we'll hold the skin kind of taut, but that hand's not really doing a whole lot. You're like
Mhm.
waxing with your one hand. Like a lot of the times, you're still only using your dominant hand. So I feel like with threading, you have to get used to both. So I think patience is my first recommendations when it comes to it. Um, and getting into it for the right reasons. I think if you really truly want to learn threading, you're going to crush it no matter what. I think if you are looking for just like another way to make money, it's not really going to translate very well. But yeah, I think patience and really just diving in and getting to the meat of it is the best way. And then I have a threading manual on my website that they can look at. And I feel like it's a really good way to get started. I think everybody learns very differently. So I've had people that have been successful learning online. I've had people be more successful learning in person. So I think I actually just had a podcast episode about this, but or it's going to be coming out about finding the right educator for you. And I talk a lot about you needing to be a little more introspective. Like what do you need as the person that's being educated to? Like I think you need to
Right.
answer those questions before seeking out training. But I think the manual is a good place to start because it's going to break everything down for you and it has videos attached so you can get some visual aspects and things like that. I just think it's a great way to start. And then you can kind of go from there and see once you get through the manual, you go, oh, wow, I really would benefit from somebody in person, or maybe I want a more one-on-one experience, or maybe I just need to practice and I think I can get this. So I think it's kind of like a good stepping stone to start from.
I love that you have all these resources. I will make sure to plug in your manual down in the description so everyone can take a look at that.
Yeah,
And
I'll give you
then,
guys a little discount code too.
oh, yes, special discount for all the listeners. We love it. And then also, you mentioned this is a perfect time to talk about a little bit about your podcast. She has a podcast called Brow Education, you guys, and where she talks all about brows and hair removal. Can you talk to us a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, so when I got into education, I feel like one of the biggest things is it's an investment. Education is expensive, and now do I think the ROI on that is always there 110%, but I know that in the lulls between investment, we still want to continue learning. So I felt like the podcast is a really great way for me to give out free education. I get to talk to a lot of different brow professionals and get their advice and their tips, and I just feel like I as a new beauty professional, I was looking for something like this. And
Yes.
I just think that there's a lot of really cool skincare and waxing and different things like that. And I just wanted something super hyper focused on just brows. So that's where brow education came from. And that's kind of the focus is talking about different, different types, treatments, ingredients, stages of being a solo brow artist or growing a team, etc.
Love it. Love it. Love it, you guys. All right. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you, Megs. Oh my gosh, I don't want this to end, but unfortunately, we have to wrap up here. All of Megan's resources will be listed down below. All of her Instagram and everything will be down below. And is there any, are there any tips before we leave that you want to give any new brow artist?
I would say just practice. Start looking, like develop your eye. Look at people's eyebrows, start noticing different things. If you're already practicing, maybe not as just a brow artist, but practicing in general, start like taking photos and like critiquing your work almost. I feel like I've only ever gotten better by comparing myself to myself. Like I want the next time that
Mm,
client to comes in, I want her brows to be even better, even though I'm working with the same things here, right? So I think just challenge yourself to develop your eye and just look at a lot of brows. That's the best way
love
to learn.
it. Love it. It's so funny whenever I look at someone, I'm like, I'm judging your eyebrows in my head.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's how we develop it, right? Watching movies and shows, you're like, I could do this to that and it would look better, more symmetrical.
Exactly.
That's you developing your eye. It's perfect.
All right, Megs. Well, thank y'all so much for listening to today's episode of the Waxing Table podcast. And we will see you guys in the next one. Take care.